Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's Board of Zoning Appeals. We will note for the record that we have all members present, so we are fully accounted for. First item that we do have up is the approval of minutes. One quick note on there, our attorney for that evening, Rob, was not here. It was Tyler. So just a quick update on that piece of it, but otherwise, any motions on the minutes?
I make a motion, we approve the minutes as written with the correction, sorry.
Motion with the correction and a second with the correction as well? Correct. Awesome. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify with an aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. I see no old business before us, so we'll move directly into new business. First item up tonight is docket 26-13. This is America's Home Place requesting a development standard variance. And Ben, you have some info?
We're connected to the screen here, wireless. Yeah, let me go through, while this is attempting to connect and get me the pin on the screen, we'll kind of go through some of the background here. This site on Birchwood Drive will look familiar to you. This is something, here we go. Just not quite a year ago came before you. If you recall, there were two billboards that were on this property that you'll actually see here on the aerial photography. One located here, one located here. Last year, the billboard owner came in and requested a variance, but actually what they were doing is they were removing the two existing structures and putting one new structure up, and it actually sits up here at this western corner of the property. And that's relevant here because now we have a development proposed here. As part of this development, and I'll let the applicant talk a little bit about what this is. This is essentially a series of model homes that will be used as model homes. One of them will have their sales office, and then the others will just be for people to walk through and see potential product that could be built on their lot. So again, I'll let the applicant talk a little bit about their business model and look in this market. But the reason that the billboard locations are critical here, that new billboard is up here at the western end, and there was a visibility easement recorded along the interstate that you can see here represented in this light gray. And there are restrictions on blocking visibility to that billboard, which essentially means that landscaping can't be planted there, trees in particular, because they would block the view of that billboard. And that is relevant because we have a thoroughfare overlay district associated with Interstate 65 that requires there to be tree and shrub plantings along that buffer corridor along the interstate. And so because there are restrictions on trees being there, we had to find some alternatives with the applicant to figure out how they could perhaps meet the intent, but maybe not the letter of that overlay buffer requirement. And so what they did is, you can see here in this plan, you're going to see that they have the parking lot perimeter landscaping and interior landscaping. They've got the building-based landscaping around all of the structures as required in the overlay district. What they've done, though, is they've got the buffer shrub plantings planted along the buffer, but then because they weren't able to put any trees within this area, they then planted the required number of trees at both the western and eastern ends where they would avoid the visibility easement. So they do have the required plantings per all of the landscape requirements on the site. They just weren't able to put them in the specific location where they were required associated with the landscape buffer. So we did ask them to go ahead and get the variance, even though the plants were there, because they couldn't meet the specific requirement of planting them along that buffer. So that is the request before you're here tonight related to the landscape corridor buffer. That's UDO section 211J2. And they're essentially seeking relief from the planting requirement to allow them to put the trees that are required in alternate locations and moving forward there. So that is the request. I will quickly walk through the findings of fact from the staff report. The first is that the approval will not be injurious to public health. Staff had determined that relief from the corridor buffer planting requirement will not be injurious to public health. Planting plan will include all the required plants, but spaced in an alternative manner to allow for the billboard visibility easement. Plants obviously in this location do not obstruct any sorts of visibility for pedestrian or drivers either. Second is that the use and value of the area adjacent will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. Staff determined the requested variance will not affect the use and value. In fact, the applicant is providing all the landscape plant materials, and the investment they're making, we think, will actually improve the value of the areas, in addition to providing the aesthetic that's really intended from the landscape corridor buffer. Finally, the strict application of the terms of the UDO will result in practical difficulties. Staff did determine that the strict application of the UDO will result in practical difficulties due to the planting restrictions associated with the recorded visibility easement for the billboard. There is not an obvious planting solution that meets the requirements of the UDO without infringing on that easement. And so the applicant, and working with staff, had to propose an alternate solution that still meets the requirements for the number of plants, but proposes them in alternate locations to avoid that easement. The alternate plan that we had talked about just a moment ago also includes landscaping around the homes, parking lot, and along Birchwood Drive that will still meet the intent of the ordinance, but in an alternative manner, in particular related to the landscape corridor buffer. So with that then, City of Lebanon Planning staff recommends approval of the development standards variance request to permit relief from the Thoroughfare Overlay District landscape corridor buffer planting requirements of the Unified Development Ordinance. With that, I'd be happy to answer questions if there are any.
Thank you, Ben. Any questions for Ben from the commission? Would the applicant care to speak this evening? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Claxton, and I represent America's Home Place as the general manager for our future Indianapolis/Lebanon location. America's Home Place is a custom on-your-lot home builder. We were founded in 1972 by Mr. Barry Connor with the philosophy of principle before profit. What that means in our hearts is that we are here to serve our customers with a fair market price on homes in underserved areas, primarily in rural locations. When we looked at the market for central Indiana, we felt that landowners were lacking in the available home builders necessary to bring their homes and visions to fruition. And that is why we've targeted Lebanon, Indiana as our future home here in Indiana, as we can serve multiple rural counties surrounding the area. We're primarily looking to build in Hendricks, Boone, Tippecanoe, as far north as Howard County, and then east to west from Crawfordsville and Montgomery County to Greenfield out east. So we're covering a very large footprint here in central Indiana to serve those that are underserved with home building opportunities. So, this location we've identified it does meet our business model very well. We use our model homes as our billboards. They are how we generate traffic to our model homes so that we can acquire new customers and make our presence known to the public. So not only do these trees kind of propose a hardship for the billboard easement, but also for what we're intending to do with our business model. So with that, I'll give you a quick background on our company, and I'm here to answer any questions that you have. So,
Thank you very much. Any questions from the commission? Just to confirm, so is this like standard stick-built homes?
It is stick-built homes, and we are going to offer a basement as our standard foundation for the market. We will have the opportunity to build homes on slabs as well if the market sees fit. So,
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. Any other questions at all? Perfect. Thank you for being here. We'll go ahead and open ourselves up for public hearing. So I will officially open the public hearing on docket 26-13. If you have any comments, please feel free to step to the microphone. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes and try not to repeat. Dramatic pause while we wait for any sudden movements. Seeing absolutely none, we will close the public hearing. So the public hearing on docket 26-13 was officially opened and closed. And with that, do we have any last questions for Mr. Bontrager, or should we move on to a motion? Motion it is. I would entertain any motions.
I'll make a motion to approve docket 26-13 as written.
Got a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from multiple people, either
Oh,
one.
Sorry.
All those in favor, please signify with an aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry unanimously. Thank you very much. We're excited to have you as part of the community. All right, we're going to move on to our second item, and this is docket 26-15. And this is the city utilities requesting 2 standard variances. This is on Chicago Street. So, Ben, I'll turn it over to you.
Right. So as we all know and understand, Lebanon Utilities is going through a growth phase right now. And one of the projects that they are looking at out here at the water treatment plant on Chicago Street is to add an administrative building and parking lot here. So I wanted to start obviously on the site so you can see where we're located on Chicago Street, but also show you and the fact that there's very little space to add much here. So, and that's really, as we're evaluating the site with Lebanon Utilities and figuring out how to site the new admin building, which I'll show you a footprint here in a second, there really is not a lot of opportunity. So for 2 reasons. One, it's really not that easy to move the equipment related to the water treatment plant. And 2, with the county regulated drain to the south, there's limitations due to the easement there. So really the only place you have to make any significant improvements are on the north end of this property adjacent to Chicago Street. And so there's a quick overview of the site. Let me go to the next page here, if it'll let me. Back. This it'll be a little bit hard to read, but you can see the footprint of the building outlined in the dark line. And again, really, this is more just to show you how much there's other significant improvements on the site that really limit where you can put things. Again, you see all of the related equipment here. There's a lot of utility lines that run through this property also. And so really the only place they could fit a building is on this north end of the property. And so in looking at the size of the structure they needed and the location that they were working with, that you can kind of see on this next one too, a little bit better, just the footprint in and of itself. And obviously the blue is also floodplain, floodway. So there's some restrictions there as well. And really looking to try to maximize what they could do here. And actually the other, couple that with the fact that we just rezoned this to institutional form so that the use fit within the zoning district. This was zoned residential until we rezoned it last year. So we cleaned up the zoning so that the use was permitted, but in doing so, the institutional zoning district, as you see here in the red lines, really limits with the front setback, in particular on Chicago Street, the amount of buildable space. So in order to really maximize what they needed to do here from an administrative office and garage perspective, they were going to need variances to be able to site this on the site, as you can see here. Let me make sure I've got my math right. And actually, as Lori pointed out, I've left some wrong information in the staff report from something old. So let me see if I can find. Yeah, so the front building setback is proposed to be 15 feet on Chicago Street and about 10 feet on this eastern property line. So slight reductions in both cases. This would be a 50-foot front setback. You're seeing here the red line, that's 15, and then it's 15 and then 10 on the side. So required and proposed. And so just maybe to go back to show you, and part of as we're going through this with them and looking at it, you can see here, and now they are residential structures, but the residential structures are also much closer to Chicago Street than the 15 feet that's proposed. This building will still sit back significantly further, probably between 5 and 15 feet in most cases from any of the other structures that are already on Chicago Street. So they were sensitive to that fact, but in making sure that they weren't closer to the street, but instead are in most cases further away from the other properties along Chicago Street. And so let me maybe just to give a little bit more. They did also provide us with some renderings of what the building looks like. It was also important to them to design something that really fit into the neighborhood, but at the neighborhood scale. So this is not a building that's significantly taller than the residential structures. It's got brick to match other municipal buildings. This is actually the garage side of the structure. And then this would be the office side. This would be the northwest corner of the structure. Again, something that while it is taller in a single story, it's not going to be significantly taller than a 2-story residential structure would be. It's again really making sure that this fit in with other administrative buildings for the city with the brick and other stone materials, but making sure that it's a scale that was appropriate for what is primarily a residential neighborhood in this area other than the water treatment plant. But again, the request here tonight is for requesting relief from the front and side setbacks to allow the north property line to be reduced from 50 to 15 and the east property line to be reduced from 15 to 10. Walked through a little bit of some of the details of the structure, why they needed to site it where they did. And then just for the record, I'll run through the findings of fact. First, again, is approval will not be injurious to public health. Staff determined that relief from the building setback requirements will not be injurious to public health. The proposed location will still be set back from each property line to ensure no impact to the local neighborhood, and certainly set back further than other adjacent structures. Second, the use and value of the area adjacent will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. Staff determined the use and value of the area will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. While the proposed setbacks are reduced from those required in the institutional zoning district, the building is still set back further from Chicago Street than any adjacent residential structure and is approximately 60 feet away from the neighboring residential structure to the east. So we looked at the separation between this structure and the home to the east. There's still a pretty significant distance, again, 60 feet away to make sure we're not infringing on some of the neighboring properties. Third, the strict application of the UDO will result in practical difficulties. And staff determined that the strict application of the terms of the UDO will result in practical difficulties. The front and side building setbacks required within the institutional zoning district would significantly limit the amount of buildable area on the site when coupled with the floodplain area and existing water treatment plant structures. The proposed setbacks, as we've discussed, are consistent with existing structures in the surrounding area. So again, trying to keep it consistent across the neighborhood. With that then, staff recommendation, planning staff recommends approval of the development standards variance request to permit relief from the front and side building setback requirements of the UDO subject to the following condition. And that would be, and we didn't work out necessarily with the applicant yet exactly what this will look like depending on an amount of turf space available. But we have put a condition here that the applicant will, in essence, work with staff to figure out the best places where they could install some building-based landscaping on either the north and or east sides of the proposed building where feasible to soften the impact of the reduced setbacks on adjacent neighbors. And so with that, then I'd be happy to answer any questions.
One item, as we look at the site plan, do I recall there were multiple roads and whatnot platted, right? But I believe those were all vacated as part of that year ago.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, you still had, I think there were 2 alley rights of way that bisected through the site. There was a kind of a weird easement or alley right away adjacent to the creek that didn't even make sense. We couldn't even figure out what the history on that was, but we did clean all of those unused rights of way up last year.
Okay. Any questions from the commission for Ben? Would the applicant care to speak this evening?
Ben, can we launch this again? Can we show that? Here we go. All right. Hi, I'm Bob Holden with Wessler Engineering, and we're the design firm for the building. As Ben said, the building site has been optimized to place the building with a large number of constraints, primarily utilities and floodplain. One thing to note, this aerial is an older aerial. On the eastern side of the site or the right side, as you look at this, the buildings on that side of the site are no longer there. So you have basically the top or the north side of the site and the east side of the site that are vacant. The north side of the site will see the building. The east side of the site is going to be primarily drive. And the intent for this structure is that currently the utility houses both the wastewater and the water administration functions, as well as all of the maintenance functions at the wastewater treatment plant. Both of those functions have outgrown that space, and so there needs to be a duplicate space to create it to be able to separate those 2 departments. And so this is what this building will do. Any questions?
Questions from the commission? Awesome. Thank you
Thank you.
very much. So with that, again, this item does have a public hearing component. So we will officially open the public hearing on docket 26-15. If you have any comments, we'll follow those same rules, limit to 3 minutes if possible. Please feel free to step to the microphone. Seeing no movement towards the microphone, we will close the public hearing. So the public hearing was officially opened and closed on docket 26-15 in reference to the utilities building on Chicago Street. Any final questions from the commission for Ben? With that, I would entertain any motions.
I'll make a motion that we approve the development standard variance request to permit relief from the front and side building setback requirements of the UDO, subject to the following condition: that the applicant install building-based landscaping on the north and east sides of the proposed building where feasible to soften the impact of the reduced setbacks on adjacent neighbors.
Have a motion. Do we have a second? Got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify with an aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry unanimously. Thank you very much for being here this evening on that item. And we have one more item on our docket this evening, which is 26-16. And this is a variance request for a 6-foot privacy fence on Witt Road.
All right, so over the last few years, some of you may be familiar with the Witt Road project that the city is undertaking. We've made a number of improvements along Witt Road, both to the road and also adding pedestrian infrastructure. And there's a few locations on Witt Road where you've got some of the older parcels that existed prior to any of the other improvements in these areas. And a number of these either still owned to the center line of the road or owned right up adjacent to the existing pavement. And this property is one of those. And so you may recall a very, very similar request to this about 2 or 3 years ago on the property directly south of here, which you can kind of see. You can see the new sidewalks that are here. This property is in a very similar situation to the property to the south. They both owned up to the edge of the pavement, and they both had existing 4-foot chain link fences that were right on the property line. So in the process of the city buying right-of-way for the Witt Road project, this next phase, it's going to basically require the removal of that existing fence. And so what we worked at, excuse me, with the property to the south, they were, now that they were introducing pedestrian activity out here, they wanted a little bit more security, a little bit more privacy, and everybody along here has dogs, it seems like, and so they just wanted a little bit taller fence to make sure that their dogs are secure. And so what this property owner, the Babs, asked is, can we have a similar sort of treatment with the fence as the property to the south? They wanted to basically come from the corner of that fence that was installed on the property to the south, come directly north up to their driveway, and then jog it back to the east and create a gate for the driveway. And so I'll show you first from the site plan that they drew up for us to give you an idea. Maybe I'll zoom out a little bit so you can actually see it a little bit. So essentially there's the property line with the property to the south, and the corner of that fence. And again, as I suggested, they want to come up with a 6-foot wood privacy fence, come directly north from that corner. And then you come up here and you get to about to their driveway, and then they want to jog it back to the east and put a gate there. The fence will end up being just a few feet in front of the house, and that's where the restriction comes in. The ordinance requires that any fence that is in front of the primary structure is limited to 4 feet in height and 50% opacity. So what they're hoping to do is be able to essentially repeat what the property to the south did, get that taller fence out there for a little bit more privacy, security, bring it due north, and then bring it up to the house, to the driveway, and then to the house. And so just to kind of show you, I was able to get a Google Street View that kind of shows you the property in question is what you see here. You can see the corner of that existing fence that was approved via variance by the Board of Zoning Appeals and the sidewalk that was constructed as part of that. So, and you can see then their fence on their property, the chain link fence that comes out. essentially to their property line adjacent to the road. And so they will basically pull it back from the fence that is there now, probably a good 10 feet, if not more than that. So it matches up with the corner of this fence, bring it due north. It is still technically in front of the home, but it is much further set back than the existing fence is now, and will allow for the city to buy that right away and continue the pedestrian infrastructure up Whit Road with this next phase of the project. And so that's a quick overview of the request. Again, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, we just did the property to the south, a very similar variance request to allow that and I did ask the applicant, I was like, if you could move it back 3 feet, you would avoid this variance. And he said, honestly, it would work, except for that'll put it right through a tree, a flagpole, and a massive landscape stone that I'm not even sure if I could move it anymore. So he said that it would be better if we went ahead with the variance than for me to try to figure out how to rearrange my property so that it would work to move that fence. So that is a request before you here tonight to get relief from the residential fence height and opacity requirement in the front yard. That is UDO section 5.3B. And again, like the other two, I'll go through those 3 findings of fact. The first, the approval will not be injurious to public health. Staff determined that relief from the fence height and opacity requirements in the front yard poses no imminent threat to public health. While the fence is located within the front yard along the property line adjacent to Whit Road, its location is not directly on the property line and causes no visibility issues along Whit Road or at the intersection with Victoria Drive. So just to kind of go back to the overall site plan here, you kind of see that we're looking at the south property. It's not in an intersection. Victoria Drive is quite a bit further north from the location we're talking about. So we're not going to be causing any sort of motorist visibility issues or pedestrian visibility issues because it is set back far enough to be able to avoid those sorts of impacts. Second, the use and value of the area will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. Staff determined the use and value of the area will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. The fence is constructed of quality materials. It's a wood privacy fence, and its location in no way inhibits the expected use of any adjacent property. In addition, the proposed fence and the request tonight is very similar to the fence on the neighboring property to the south. And I put in here that's 1801 Whit Road, and that was approved via variance by the BZA back in 2020. It's actually a few more years ago than I thought. And then finally, the strict application of terms of the UDO will result in practical difficulties. Staff determined the strict application of the UDO will result in practical difficulties. The reason that we're even here tonight is that the applicant is requesting this variance as a result of impacts due to the road project by the city. The proposed right-of-way purchase requires a removal and replacement of the existing fence. In order to provide additional privacy and security for the yard, the applicant desires to replace the chain link fence with a wood privacy fence, which is a request similar to the neighboring property to the south that was approved 5 years ago. So with that then, staff recommendation, we do recommend approval of the development standards variance request to permit a wood privacy fence located in a front yard. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the commission? Just to confirm, we're only looking at that side of the house, correct? We're not going to the north end.
That is the request, is just the south, between the house and the south property line.
Okay, perfect.
And it is a wood fence, correct?
Correct.
All right. With that, would the applicant care to speak this evening? Any questions for the applicant from the commission? Perfect. All right, so we will again open the public hearing as we have a couple of times this evening. So the public hearing on docket 26-16 is officially open. If you have any comments, please feel free to step to the microphone. Limit your comments to 3 minutes. Seeing, again, no movement towards the microphone, I will close the public hearing. So public hearing was opened and closed officially on docket 26-16. Any final questions, comments from the commission? So with that, I would entertain any motions.
I make a motion to approve the development standard variance request to permit a wooden privacy fence located in a front yard.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify with an aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you guys very much for taking time this evening to be here. And that item, I believe, is the last item we have on our agenda. Seeing no other items, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify with an aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. We will see you at the next scheduled meeting.